Hello and welcome back to Raw Sport, Raw Sports shows. Raw Sport, we're calling this one Raw Sport Weekly. We're doing a 2021 NFL free agency and draft special. We're recording this in about, early April. The draft is coming up in a couple of weeks. And we will get this out hopefully just a week beforehand so people have this little guide as a useful point of reference. I am your head of sport, Raw's head of sport, Josh Sim. Thank you so much for watching. If this is your first time watching, welcome. Please, if you enjoy this, yes, this is the YouTube cliched thing, like and subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the channel. And in the video description, you have the links to our social medias, our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So give that a follow. If you're a Warwick student or if you're going to be a Warwick student, you're a prospective fresher, you can join our Raw Sport group and get involved and see what kind of show opportunities are there. We are always, looking to bring on as many people, as many voices as we can. So if you, I should quickly plug some of the stuff we've recently done. We've recently done an F1 preview show. It was 3 hours long. But I know 3 hours long is obviously a lot of time. So you can look in the video description for chapters. We broke down every driver, every team ahead of the season that just recently kicked off. So you can obviously give that a watch, as well as all the quarantine streams that we've been doing, all the weekly shows as well. It's nearly been a year since we've started doing this on YouTube, which has been wild. If you want to have that little thing to look at as a retrospective, that whole year's worth of stuff we've done, then give that a look. Also I should plug Raw's looking for a new head of sport. We're gonna have by-election soon. So if you if you're a huge sports fan, and you're willing to, and you feel like you can do a decent job, maybe a better job of hosting these shows than me, feel free to run. I believe it'll be done in the summer term. I'm not particularly sure when. There's no date yet, but join the Raw Sport group. Feel free to send myself a message on any questions about the role. I'll be very willing to help. That's pretty much it. It's a fun role. Obviously, you've got the Euros, the football Euros coming up this summer. You've got the Olympics, so you can spearhead that coverage essentially, as well as the abundance of sporting events that will go on from this summer onwards to next spring. So yeah, so much to cover. With that, all that out the way, let's bring on my two guests again. We're focusing on the NFL draft that's coming up, as well as free agency that has kicked off and is still going. So with that in mind, let's bring on someone who has featured a fair bit on our NFL stuff. Curtis Leung's with me. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. And yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. We haven't seen you since our Super Bowl preview. So just quickly, what did you make of it? Did you expect the Buccaneers? What did you make of the game itself?
Oh, yeah, it was a good one, I think. Unfortunately, I think the Chiefs were outclassed quite a lot in the second half, especially, and towards halftime, in fact. But yeah, it was an enjoyable match to watch, and I didn't expect the Bucs to win. So props to Tom Brady, I guess.
He keeps defying father time, as they call it. Just a machine essentially. And let's bring on a debutante, newcomer to Raw Sport. Rithik is with us. How are you?
Hello, good to be here.
It's great to have you on, and very excited. I mean, you've been, maybe give some context. Like, has the NFL been something you've followed for a while now? Is it something more recently you've picked up?
So I used to watch a lot of the Super Bowl, so I think I've watched every one from like 48 onwards. But then this season was the first season I followed the entire season and got into the actual transactions between teams and actually getting into knowing teams and players and learning offenses and all this. When I got into it, I really got into it because obviously this year everyone's had quite a lot of free time just sitting at home. So I thought, like, I like the shows. I like watching Pat McAfee. So I was like, let me actually learn what he's talking about. Yeah. So I'm excited.
I mean, yeah, Pat McAfee, who is arguably the biggest NFL YouTuber or something along those lines. Like he probably is. Or so yeah, it's. I mean, it's great. It's great. I mean, he'll be delighted to know that he's made you a fan of the sport. But yeah, let's dive into. We'll start with the draft now. I've got a. Full disclosure, I've got CBS's sports mock draft in front of me. I know Curtis, you've also written something for the board as well, so you'll be able to talk through some of these. But it's a pretty. I mean, yeah. Let's start with that, Curtis. Where does this draft class rank compared to recent ones? Yeah, in your opinion.
Yeah, I really like this year's draft class. I think the quarterback class in particular is really interesting. And I think the receiver class for last year and this year is really interesting. I think there are some cool prospects like Penei Sewell, someone who we haven't seen, play at that level for a very long time, since perhaps Quentin Nelson. So, there are some really interesting prospects and some late round players as well who are sort of like rookie impactors we could look at.
Yeah, and obviously, a lot of people will remember draft classes with the guys at the top. Obviously, they're the people who sort of define it. And this year we have a fair few sort of talents that may become generational talents. I mean, it's obviously very hard to project going forward, but yeah, we'll start with the guy who's consistently, I think, at number one across the board, Trevor Lawrence. Jacksonville have the number one draft pick, despite the New York Jets' attempts at tanking last season, giving up late game leads. Somehow that didn't work. Jacksonville have the number one pick. Rithik, it's a sort of a slam dunk, right? They should take Trevor Lawrence. Like, it's the easy pick here.
Yeah, like I really don't see how you take anyone else. Like I don't think they have an option really. Like I think if you look at his pro day, Urban Meyer was the only coach who was there. I don't think anyone even bothered to turn up to his pro day apart from him, because they knew that he was going number one. I think Urban Meyer has a big history with young quarterbacks like Alex Smith. And I actually think, sort of alluding to free agency, Alex Smith should go to Jacksonville, be a backup to Trevor Lawrence. He can kind of be what Fitzmagic was to Tua last year, where if it gets to the fourth quarter and they need someone who's got experience and knows how to deal with that situation, they can bring someone in. I don't want to see someone like Trevor Lawrence be put in situations that could do his confidence a load of hurt. So I think getting in someone like Alex Smith to be there in case he needs it, and someone there who can mentor him would be a great idea as well.
Yeah, you mentioned it, and as you said, Urban Meyer is in the NFL, having spent a lot of time in the collegiate game. So new head coach, presumably new direction for this team. Obviously, last year Gardner Minshew was the quarterback for a while. Then it got swapped between Glennon and Minshew, sort of then rotated the role. Curtis, I mean, this pick of Lawrence, does that provide the stability that this team sort of needs at this moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly hope so, don't you? Given the instability they had last season, and I think Lawrence is one of those talents. He's not only a talented player, but he's a talented leader, and he's great in front of the press as well. I think he'll be the perfect sort of franchise resetter for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I don't know if there's really much to say other than he's an exceptional talent, and we expect him to go number one. If he doesn't, that'd be a shocker by all means. And yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, I don't know, Curtis, if you're able to compare him to Joe Burrow of like a similar spot where he was sort of the consensus number one pick. What does Trevor Lawrence offer that maybe someone like Joe Burrow doesn't?
Yeah, it's a completely different kind of prospect that we're looking at, I think. Joe Burrow was fantastic in his final season at LSU. He was a great prospect, and I really enjoyed watching him. But Lawrence is someone who's done this since high school. He's done this since he was 16. NFL scouts have been watching him since that age, and they've known this guy is really good. And he's proved it at Clemson, in his college career. So I think it's a different sort of mold that we're looking at. It's someone who's really been there, done that already. He's got a winning caliber underneath him, and it's someone who doesn't just have the talent, but he's got that pedigree, which is just different to all the other prospects we've seen recently.
Yeah, well, very, very excited. I'm sure for him, I mean, he must obviously know where he's headed, so I'm sure he's looking at housing prices in Jacksonville or looking up places to go out once this pandemic ends, and we can all do that safely. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations. I guess he is one of those prospects that has that sort of consensus number one pick. There is also seemingly a consensus for the second pick. That obviously is held by the New York Jets, who have made a significant decision in terms of giving up one of their franchise players, essentially, one of the cornerstones of their franchise, at least for now. But Zach Wilson, another quarterback, he's expected to go number 2. Rithik, what do you make of the Jets? What do you make of the pairing between Zach Wilson and the Jets?
I think now that Adam Gase is gone, it's good for any quarterback who goes in there. I think that was Darnold's problem. I don't think you get drafted 3rd overall and you're actually as bad as it looks as you are. I think it's a coaching thing, especially when you're young. So hopefully old Salah from the 49ers can help him out a bit. Again, I think I really want them to bring in a veteran guy to be behind him. I think a lot of these young quarterbacks I think we've seen need someone behind them just in case, because I don't think you want to throw people into the fire essentially. And I think getting rid of Sam Darnold, they had to do it. Sam Darnold wasn't going to stay. He wasn't a guy who could be a backup or wanted to be a backup. I still think that Sam Darnold should have gone to Pittsburgh and backed up Big Ben and then gone into the starting role next year. I was like super on that. I really wanted that to happen, but I think Carolina is still a good reset for him, and I think it's a new setting, and I think any other setting than last year's Jets will do Sam Darnold a hell of a lot of good going into next year.
Yeah, and for context, it broke recently. Sam Darnold is off to the Carolina Panthers in a trade for draft picks, I believe. I don't have the specifics with me, but
it was a 6th this year, a 4th, and a 2nd next year.
There we go. Rithik's on it. So it's a. I mean, did you have something to add, or
it was? Yeah, I think. Just a quick thing. I think so. San Francisco, they traded up to the 3rd pick. So basically, they traded up for Miami's 3rd pick. But what people don't know is that they traded up and tried to get the 2nd pick. And I think when the Jets didn't give up the 2nd pick, I think it was pretty obvious that they were going to take Zach Wilson. And not only was it obvious that they were going to take Zach Wilson, it then became obvious that they were going to get rid of Sam Darnold. And it meant that they could no longer get a 1st-round pick for Sam Darnold, which I think if they had traded him earlier, before everyone was like, well, they're definitely going to take Zach Wilson, they could have got a 1st-round pick for him. But that's just the way it goes. They already have something like 7 1st-round picks over the next 2 years, and 7 first 2-round picks over the next 2 drafts. So I think they've got enough picks, but they could have got a 1st for Sam Darnold if they had if they had done it a bit earlier.
Yeah, and Curtis, I mean, Rithik mentions obviously Robert Saleh, 1st-year coach. So, I mean, essentially, having a new quarterback with him is essentially, that's sort of the pairing, I guess, the Jets are going with, coach and quarterback combo. And obviously, there's been a fair bit of sympathy for Sam Darnold since the trade's gone down that I've seen on the internet. I guess people sympathizing with his plight, I guess, at the Jets. So I guess my question is, if it is Zach Wilson as many predict, I mean, what sort of changed environment do we expect to see with him and that Robert Saleh is going to create for him, and how much do you think that will help his transition into the professional game?
I mean, Zach Wilson's a fantastic prospect. I don't think he's going to have an issue transitioning at all. I think for the Jets, though, this is a great opportunity to restart their franchise. They had a terrible season last year, as we all know. And I think having a new guy under center, bringing in some big free agent signings, such as Corey Davis, such as Carl Lawson, I think these guys are going to really help start a new era for the Jets. And I think that's really what's needed over the next 4 or 5 years, at least. So, yeah, I really hope that this will help the Jets. But we'll have to see what happens at the end of the day. Seasons go, when the Jets picked Sam Darnold, we thought this was going to be a good pick. But it didn't turn out that way 4 years later. So here we are again.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick look at their free agency. They've obviously signed former Niners running back Tevin Coleman, who obviously helped the Niners on their way to the Super Bowl a few years ago. Corey Davis has obviously joined receiver from the Titans, Keelan Cole. So there's certainly weapons that there's certainly players there that, again, assuming Wilson goes as number 2, there are plenty of targets there for him. And Coleman, obviously, an experienced running back as well. So, yeah, I mean, again, another consensus pick. Probably, I don't know. I expect New York housing prices are quite expensive, so he's probably having a look there. But certainly, Jacksonville, New York. There's one destination I'd rather live in. So,
well, I think they're out in New Jersey. There's the MetLife and all. So it's a bit cheaper, but it's also a bit. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit dodgy.
It's close enough. It's like a half hour away or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, and obviously, we saw the success of Justin Herbert last year, and he was the 3rd quarterback to be picked up in the draft. So it doesn't really matter, I guess, when you're drafted for instant success, I guess. This is when things get dicey, because the 3rd pick, there's no consensus. I'm looking across the board. There's not really a consensus pick. Now, we should explain that the Miami Dolphins had the pick, and then it was traded to the San Francisco 49ers in a flurry of pick swaps, essentially. Again, I can look for the specifics if people want, I guess, but I think the thing is, for this draft at least, the Niners now have the 3rd pick. The Dolphins have the 12th pick.
6th. They traded back up with Philadelphia.
They have the 6th pick. See, again, it's a merry-go-round. But yes, the Dolphins essentially, this is the specifics I guess people need to know for this draft. So yeah, Rithik, why do you think the Niners aggressively went for that 3rd pick, and why do you think? I guess we sort of know because the Dolphins obviously have a young QB of their own, but why do you feel they were happy to take a few steps back?
Because I don't think anyone else is worth the 3rd overall pick, especially when you can get other assets for it and still get a guy you need. So I think that's why the Dolphins traded down. I think it was interesting that they then traded back up to 6 from 12. But going back to the 49ers, Jimmy G, they signed him for a lot of money, and I don't think he's been worth it. He got them to a Super Bowl, yes, but was that him or was that their defense? I think it was one of those few times where you may not put too much emphasis on the quarterback. He was injured last year, so I think it's slightly surprising because I don't think he's had a full year. So he didn't have a proper year after his Super Bowl year. But they clearly want to win now. I think with the 3rd pick, they take Mac Jones. I know a lot of people will be saying, "Oh, he's not worth it," and I think they could have stayed at 12 and still got him at 12. But I think it shows that their intent is clear here to get him, and I think they're going to get him because if you look at Kyle Shanahan, he didn't want Jimmy G, he wanted Kirk Cousins, and if you see who's left, Trey Lance or Justin Fields or Mac Jones, I think Mac Jones is the most like Kirk Cousins. He's very much he's a pocket quarterback. He's not particularly mobile like Fields or Lance, and I think he fits with Shanahan more than the other two. And I think Shanahan is a guy that would just want to. He can make players play well if they fit in his system. He's not a guy that fits a system around a player. So I think they go Mac Jones at 3, and he stays under Jimmy G for a year, and then Jimmy G is out next year.
Yeah, I bring up this point because Curtis, obviously Mac Jones, and I'm looking at CBS, that's sort of their, sort of consensus. A few experts don't pick Mac Jones, which is interesting. I think it's clear that whoever the 3rd ranked QB is, it's up for debate, clearly, because there are multiple options being pushed forward. Curtis, I know you had a different name in your article for the third pick. So do you want to explain who you had and explain why you think they would be a great fit for the Niners offense?
Yeah, so I took Trey Lance here. So I'm with the same idea as Rithik. I think they're looking at someone to sit behind Jimmy G for a year, and I think Trey Lance is the perfect person to do that. At North Dakota State, he ran a very similar system to what Kyle Shanahan does, and I think he can sort of implement that very easily into the NFL. Sitting behind a comfortable running game, he can just sort of do what he wants there. And I think it's sort of a prospect who we haven't seen loads of. He's only 20 years old. He hasn't had that much college football. And he's shown flashes, definitely. He's one of the top quarterback prospects, don't get me wrong, but we just don't exactly know what we're getting. And I think in this 49er system, they could elevate him to the ceiling that he could be at, which we've seen before. And I think Trey Lance could be the most successful quarterback if he's in the right system, if he's got the right weapons around him. And so I think it would make sense to me that Kyle Shanahan's looking at Mac Jones. Obviously, it's very NFL ready, but I think Trey Lance could be the guy that they pick to let him sit a year, and then he can become their face of the franchise after that.
Yeah, it's like I said, it is sort of up for grabs. I mean, up for grabs. I guess it's up for debate, this third QB pick, because obviously you guys mentioned Justin Fields as well, who's also in the mix. Had a very successful season last year, and so has vaulted his name up there as well. So it's an interesting one. I mean, is there, Rithik, is there a strong case for the Niners taking Justin Fields, or is that argument weaker, I guess, than picking any of the other two guys?
I think any other team, if they were at the third pick, they take Justin Fields. For me, Justin Fields is the third best quarterback in the class, but I think Shanahan is a guy who isn't going to just take someone because they're good. He's going to take a guy who fits more with his system rather than take a guy just because he's got a name. So that's why I think they pick Mac Jones. I think Trey Lance is also equally as valid there, but I think I don't know about Trey Lance. He's a bit like he hasn't played too much. I think he's a guy who will who should sit for 1.5, maybe 2 years. And I think that the 49ers want a guy who is either going to be ready to go middle of next season or just is only going to sit a year. And I think, unfortunately for Justin Fields, he's just a victim of circumstance where the guys ahead of him and the teams below them aren't going to pick him. And I think if any big name is going to fall in this draft, I think it's Justin Fields. I doubt past the top 10, but it is possible. And I think it actually depends on if someone trades for that fourth pick as well.
Well, okay, let's talk about where these QBs could go if they don't end up with the 49ers. So, from what I've seen, the Denver Broncos might be in the mix for new QB. Obviously, they've relied on Drew Lock last season. Mixed results. He's obviously still learning, still kind of feeling his way in getting to grips with the pro game. So the Broncos are a destination. I mean, Curtis, where do you think guys like Fields and Jones may end up and Lance may end up if not the 49ers? Because because I mean, there's such a high value on quarterbacks that I don't think it's clear that not every team's going to be looking for one.
Yeah, I like the Falcons taking a quarterback, definitely. They're not in this position often where they're picking in the top 5, and you've got to capitalize on that and take your franchise guy whilst, I mean, your Super Bowl window is closed. So, in my mock draft, I had them taking Justin Fields straight after Trey Lance at third. So I think it makes perfect sense for them to do that. I think it's important to mention that the Panthers have got Sam Darnold now, and I think that's their guy. They're extending him. They're using his 5th-year option. So he's going to be there for at least 2 years. And I think, that's them sorted pretty much. That's going to be a quarterback battle between Teddy B and Sam Darnold. And I think from what I've heard that Teddy B is looking for a trade as well. The other team that I'd be looking at is, as you say, the Broncos. Obviously, I think Elway quite likes Drew Lock, so I'd be surprised if they go quarterback this year. But if Drew Lock fails this coming season, I could see them going quarterback next year. Definitely the Patriots would be the next team that I'd be looking at for a quarterback. I think they could definitely trade up to get one of the top 5 quarterbacks if they're thinking that someone's going to go before they can pick. So at 15, they could definitely trade up. I like the Bears to go for a quarterback. they're sort of in a difficult position with Andy Dalton at the helm at the moment. So I'd really like that, and I could see Washington trading up as well for a quarterback.
So basically, expect the unexpected. Really, be on the lookout for trades and a flurry. I don't know, Rithik. Do you want to weigh in on which teams could be in the market for a new QB in the draft?
Yeah,
when we get there.
So I think Bill Belichick right now hates Kyle Shanahan because I think that he could have sat at 15 and taken Mac Jones. I think Kyle Shanahan moving up to 3 who I think to get Mac Jones has made Mac Jones a hell of a lot more valuable than he probably is in this draft. I think San Francisco could have got him at 12 if they didn't trade up as well. But now that they have traded up for him for 3, at 4, I think the Falcons, they may need a quarterback, but I don't think that they'll take one because that quarterback would have to sit for 2 years because I think they're going to stay with Matt Ryan until they can cut him, which is in 2 years' time. So I think they'll try and get assets in return for that 4th overall pick. And if they do get assets in return for that 4th overall pick, I think then the Patriots go and try and get the 4th, and I think the Broncos go and try and get the 4th. I think they're the 2 teams in the top 15 who maybe people say, oh, give these guys another year. But if they want to win, I think they're going to want to go up and get the 4th overall. I think Curtis talked about Chicago. The only thing with Chicago is that they did sign Andy Dalton. He was told he'd be the starter. And also at 20, I think you have to trade quite a lot to trade up from 20 to 4. And Carolina, as you said, they've got their guy. The Broncos may just want to sit at 9 and hope that they just get whoever the 5th quarterback is. And they may not even get a quarterback. Like you said, Elway likes Drew Lock, give him a year as well. So I think it's really up for debate, but I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta get rid of that 4th pick. And if they do get rid of that 4th pick, then I think Justin Fields goes and Trey Lance drops.
Yeah. So I've been, for the podcast listeners, you won't see this, but for the video viewers, you'll see that I've put together a ticker. And essentially, these are the only guarantees I can make at the moment. Trevor Lawrence goes number 1, Zach Wilson goes number 2, and the Niners take a QB. That's essentially the only guarantees we can pretty much make. And I don't know if I can even go on because the Falcons, obviously, you guys mentioned that maybe they'll be in the market for QB. It's interesting the lists I'm seeing now. Kyle Pitts, a tight end, has been linked with them potentially, and to supplements Hayden Hurst there. So, it's pretty wild. I don't remember. I mean, I think last year there was some sort of consensus last year with Burrow, Chase Young, and them. But this year it is it does feel wide open. So, I mean, we won't talk about the teams in order per se, but we'll talk about some of the prospects left and some of the positions. So a couple of wide receivers sort of embedded in a lot of these top 10s. Jamar Chase of Louisiana State University and Jalen Waddle from Alabama. Obviously, I think the goal for all GMs is to find someone like a Justin Jefferson, who last year had a spectacular season with the Vikings. So Curtis, who could be looking for one of these wide receivers? Where do you think they may end up on draft night?
I mean, everyone at this rate, because of the way the NFL is going. It's such a passing-oriented league. Anyone could take a receiver. You can't have enough receivers, and especially elite receivers. And all of these guys are elite receivers, don't get me wrong. I think, in particular, who has needs at receivers, I think the Bengals have a need at receiver. I know their fan base really wants to take Jamar Chase, and I could get behind that. I think the Dolphins traded back up to 6 to get a receiver, essentially. I think they're going to take a Bama guy, probably Devontae Smith, the Heisman winner, I would think. I think the Lions need to get a receiver. They've decimated their receiving core this past season. It's not pretty. I think even someone like New York Giants could get a receiver early, just on the basis that they got Kenny Golladay and they've got Darius Slayton, but they're going to want to have someone who can go over the top, like Jalen Waddle even, or someone like that, a speedy receiver over the top, or someone who can play in the slot. And I think Jalen Waddle could be that guy. I think you've got teams like the Eagles who could definitely use some weapons. I think even someone like the Patriots could use a wide receiver. The list goes on, really, to be honest. Like, most teams in the NFL could use a receiver at this point.
Yeah, and even, I mentioned Kyle Pitts. Some are saying he could end up being one of the better receiving options in the top 10 as well. So, Rithik, what about you? Where do you think some of these guys will end up? Because, yeah, as Curtis said, receivers are sort of, it's a valuable commodity in the NFL to have.
Yeah. So the Bengals, I think, are a very interesting pick because they should take Penei Sewell. They need someone who protects Joe Burrow. But I've heard that Joe Burrow has asked for Jamar Chase. And if you're the Bengals, I don't think you deny Joe Burrow Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is part of the reason why, he's a hell of a lot of the reason, actually, why Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. So I wouldn't be surprised if they took him at 5. I do think Jalen Waddle is the best receiver in the class, but I think with that connection with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase goes at 5. I think then the Dolphins will take someone. I wouldn't be. They have Mike Gesicki at tight end. Tua likes his tight ends, and if they did take someone, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Kyle Pitts. But they wouldn't use Kyle Pitts as a tight end. I don't think anyone who drafts Kyle Pitts will use him as a tight end because he's just far too good of a receiver. In terms of other teams that need one, I know Curtis said Detroit need one because they got rid of Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. The Giants could take someone. I think Devontae Smith falls because of the durability concerns. He's 6'1", but he is quite light. So I think there's a lot of sort of old school NFL GMs who would just look at him and be like, oh, he's too small, and not want to take him because they're scared to take him. And then I have incredibly strong feelings about the Baltimore Ravens at the end of the first round taking whoever the best receiver is, because please, for the love of God, give Lamar Jackson a wide receiver 1, please, because he's such an incredible quarterback and he can rush for 1,000 yards a season. But the only reason he rushes for 1,000 yards a season is because he does no one to throw to. Because no offense to Marquise Brown, he's not a wide receiver 1. He's really small. He's electrically quick, but he can't just throw the ball up to him because he's not going to go up and get it. I think Green Bay, again, please, for the love of God, give Aaron Rodgers a wide receiver, an elite wide receiver. We'll get into like actual names later on, but I think those are the teams that could take wide receivers lower down. And again, top 15, all of them could do with a wide receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, again, like I said, they're a valuable commodity in the sport. And so, obviously the draft is one of the easy ways to get to stock up on them. Yeah. So, like I said, and what seemingly seems like the top 10 of a lot of drafts, and correct me if I'm wrong, are stacked with offensive players. Other names that we've sort of mentioned in passing, Penei Sewell, who Rithik mentioned, offensive lineman. He is also sort of embedded in that top 10. So, you get down to maybe the 10th pick is sort of when the first defensive player comes up. And, compare that with last year with Chase Young going number 2. Simmons went to the Cardinals in the top 5. There were a fair few defensive players that were up there. But this year, it seems the pendulum swung the other way. Patrick Surtain is the number 1 sort of defensive player, consensus defensive player in the draft. Curtis, is that right? Is he? What will he do to whichever team he ends up, and where do you think he might end up?
Let me start with the first question. Is he the top defensive prospect? I have doubts. He is really good, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from Patrick Surtain here. He's a fantastic corner. I think he'll be fantastic, but I think Micah Parsons has really been snubbed here just because of his off-field issues. And I get they're an issue, of course they are. And he's got sort of character issues as well. But if you're looking at talent alone, you're looking at their tape, I think Micah Parsons is the biggest difference maker on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that can't be played down very much. I think he's going to fall in the draft because of his character issues, unfortunately. But I think he has the potential to be Defensive Rookie of the Year next year. And I don't speak lightly of that. In terms of Patrick Surtain, though, I'm looking at 10 for the Cowboys, basically. We saw their abysmal secondary last year. I think everyone can agree with that. They were giving up 40 points plus on a lot of games. And I think pairing Patrick Surtain with Trayvon Diggs, those Alabama corners will be able to work together very well. And I think Surtain himself is a lockdown corner anyway. When you pair him with his college mate, I think it'll be fantastic. And it's a great storyline anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, you mentioned Micah Parsons, who's obviously in that sort of fringe top 10, may make it in, maybe the first pick outside the top 10, essentially. So, yeah, that's sort of an interchangeable one for sure. Closing out on the draft before we head into free agency, we've obviously mentioned sort of the top prospects. I'm curious to know if there's any prospects sort of lower down the order that you've got a keen interest in. So I don't know, Rithik, do you have one in mind? Is there a player that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of lower down picks that I think would be really valuable. I think Caleb Farley is the best corner. I just think he has injury concerns, so I think he's going to fall. And I think the Cardinals can take him at 16. They need a corner. And I think if he falls to 16, I don't see how you don't pick him up. And then, like I mentioned earlier with the receivers, just please, Baltimore, Terrence Marshall Jr., he may not be worth the first round pick. He may be a second round pick. Trade up in the second round to get him. But he's a big body. He's someone who Lamar can throw the ball up to instead of having to just run himself. And then I think sort of the other two that I'm really high on is Kadarius Toney to the Green Bay Packers. You see, Kadarius Toney is an elite separator. You see what Aaron Rodgers can do with an elite separator like Devontae Adams. You give him another one in Kadarius Toney, I think he just recreates and does even better than his season this year. If you think about what he did without many weapons, and then I think the Steelers taking Najee Harris at 24. Harris said that he had a Zoom call with the Steelers yesterday. They need a big power back after getting rid of James Conner. They need someone who can sort of establish the run in a game. And I don't see how Najee Harris isn't the guy you take. They need an inside offensive lineman, but I think you can get one in the second round if you either trade up in the second round or you're willing to see if a few of them fall. So those are my sort of lower down picks that I think are really valuable and I think should happen.
Yeah, Curtis, I'll swing it over to you. Are there players lower down the order that maybe people aren't talking as much that maybe they should be taking an interest in?
Absolutely. I just want to echo what Rithik said about the Baltimore Ravens as well, about the receiver. I definitely think Terrace Marshall is the perfect fit for them. And I really hope that's the reason why Baltimore haven't gone after a top tier receiver in free agency. It's because they're looking at Terrace Marshall. I really hope that's the case, because as Rithik said, Lamar needs someone outside of the numbers who can make contested catches. And, every quarterback needs a safety valve. And I think Terrace Marshall could offer that for Baltimore, and they really need one. We saw it this year. In terms of my own players that I'd like, not many people are talking about Rashad Bateman at the moment. And I think that's concerning, because in a lot of classes, he'd be the wide receiver one for me. And I think it's only because we've got these elite talents such as Devontae Smith, such as Jalen Waddle, such as Jamar Chase, that Rashad Bateman's fallen to the 20 ranges. But I think he's someone who is very similar to like an Allen Robinson kind, who, that would be my pro comparison for him. It's someone who can separate at an elite level, and it's someone who can make contested catches too. He's going to be a fantastic primary receiver, and I wouldn't be surprised to see if one of those better teams later on in the draft can put him in the slot and he can do something like what Justin Jefferson did last year. In terms of another player that I like, I really like Pat Freiermuth. And I know that it's a bit strange to like a tight end, really, but for me, he's probably one of the better tight ends we've seen come out in the draft for a couple of years now. But, he's insanely talented, and I think he's only fallen to the second round because we have a phenomenal talent in Kyle Pitts. But I could see Pat Freiermuth landing with a good team and making an immediate impact.
Well, those are sort of the names that these guys are keeping an eye on, and we will see where they land. I do, again, down at the bottom of the screen for those who watch this video, these are the only guarantees I can make, honestly. If one of these goes wrong, then all bets are off. I'll say that, because things, and we've seen it before with these NFL drafts. They're sort of the things, the moves you expect teams to make and that they don't make. Last year, the Packers picking up Jordan Love, a backup QB. I think that was one that took everyone by surprise, and not taking a receiver, for instance. So it just goes to show that a lot of it's sort of a stab in the dark at times. But again, it's exciting. There's a lot of players here who obviously have star potential, and I'm very interested to see where they end up and which teams. And I'm sure we'll be back to talk about which teams reached too high for some players and which teams have made the smart moves. So we'll see about what happens. But yeah, I mean, it's a good time to transition. Unless anyone else has any final words about this draft class, we'll transition into free agency, where, my goodness, a flurry of activities going on. I mean, it's mind-boggling. I don't know where we start. I mean, obviously, the last time we were on air, we talked about I think the big move at the time was the Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford trade on the Super Bowl preview show. So you can find our thoughts on that one. So we won't rehash that one, but it's fair to say many other QBs have swapped around. So I think going back to the Sam Darnold one, we talked about what it means for the Jets. We sort of mentioned what it would mean for the Panthers, but we didn't dive in too much. So yeah, Curtis, what does that do for the Panthers? Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater was their starting QB, if I'm not mistaken, last year, and did a solid job. Wasn't a hugely spectacular job, but did a pretty solid job. Now Sam Darnold comes in, and now obviously it's going to be interesting to see who sort of starts the season, and then if any changes are made mid-season or so. But what do you think about the Panthers being a good landing spot for Sam Darnold?
I think it's a great landing spot for both Sam Darnold himself and Carolina. I think if I'm Carolina, I'd really be inclined to keep Teddy Bridgewater and let him start, because what you've got at the moment is you've got Teddy Bridgewater, who's a high floor quarterback, someone who's not going to lose you games. He's just, a game manager, as what we'd call him. And then you've got Sam Darnold, someone who was drafted as one of the top prospects in the NFL draft, and he just didn't work out in New York. And I think there are many reasons for it, and it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but he's still got a fantastic high ceiling that teams should look to tap into. And I think in Carolina, they can really do that because they've got the necessary weapons already there. They've got Robbie Anderson. They're reuniting them, who did fantastically after he left the New York Jets. And they've also got DJ Moore. They've also got David Moore as a solid third option. So you've got your receivers there. I think they franchise tagged Taylor Moton this year, who's fantastic offensive lineman. We've talked about how important offensive linemen are, and I think Matt Paradis, who they drafted a couple of years ago at center, is a fantastic player too. So I think they've got a really good team to help a young quarterback like Darnold develop and fulfill his potential. I particularly like the idea of Joe Brady helping Sam Darnold. Joe Brady is one of those offensive coordinators who's incredibly creative, and he can make things really easy for offensive players. And I think that's what Sam Darnold needs, because in New York with various coaches, he didn't get that support that he needed during game day rather. And he wasn't making good reads, obviously, because no one was really open. And that's down to both the players and the coaching. But in Carolina, you've got a better coach and you've got better weapons. So I think he's set up for success, and I really hope he can manage it.
Yeah. It's it's interesting. It's going to be, again, like I said, it's going to be an interesting season to see what the Panthers do. And really, I just wanted to ask you about the Panthers. Is this a move? Should we expect any, short-term improvement, or is this sort of one we're going to have to just wait and see, and over the coming years to see how this move for Darnold how it impacts the team? Really, is this sort of a long-term move, or should we expect any short-term improvement? Because they're sort of in that mid to low tier of teams across the sport, really. And so, you wouldn't have them automatically making the playoffs by any means. So does this improve them in the short term, or are we sort of stuck waiting to see how this will play out in the long term?
I think they now have the weapons that they need to compete, at least offensively. I think you got Christian McCaffrey, just a ridiculously good player he gives Sam Darnold so many options, whether he wants to just hand it off or he wants to throw to him out the backfield for a quick check down for a safe throw. I think it leaves them open to getting Kyle Pitts at 8. And I think if they can get Kyle Pitts at 8, if Miami don't take him, I think that would be probably best case scenario for them, because then he's got 2 essentially like wide receiver ones he can throw to. He's got a tight end who can play literally anywhere. He's got a running back who can run like a madman and catch like a elite slot receiver. And he's got an offensive line that's experienced and that can protect him behind an offensive coordinator that can make life as easy as possible for him. On top of that, his elite talent. I think people forget that Sam Darnold is only 23 years old. Joe Burrow was drafted at 23 years old. I think either Sam Darnold's maybe a bit younger or only ever so slightly older than Joe Burrow. So it's not like he's like Trubisky where he's like 26 and I think he's going to be once he leaves one team, he's now going to be a backup forever. I think he still has elite starting potential. And I think all the pieces are there for Carolina. And especially with their defense and Jeremy Chin, I wouldn't be surprised if they make a decent run at it this year. Playoffs, I think, are very possible, but I don't think they get past the wild card if they do make it to the playoffs. But it's very, very encouraging for them.
Yeah, it's we shall see what happens with the Panthers, but it should be a very, very interesting thing. Curtis, I know you had something you wanted to add to the sort of Panthers discussion.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a rumor that the Panthers wanted to trade up to the 4th overall pick with the Falcons, but they got rejected in the end, and I think that's why they went for Sam Darnold, because they were initially looking to get one of the top 5 quarterbacks that we've talked about already, but they've had to settle somewhat for Sam Darnold. But I think it's almost a silver lining to this, because in my opinion, Sam Darnold, if he was coming out for draft now, he'd be one of the top quarterbacks within this discussion. He'd be maybe the 2nd or 3rd quarterback in this discussion. And so I think what Carolina has got is one of the potentially best quarterbacks they could have gotten in the situation anyway, for not very much, essentially, for a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick next year and a 6th this year, which isn't loads to give up for a franchise guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll find out. Obviously, all these predictions we make, and then sometimes we've seen young QBs can flame out at times as well. There's someone comes to mind, but I've forgotten who. Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne Haskins, that's it. Bloody hell.
He's got too much money for his own good, that kid.
To my point, he is flamed out quite quickly after coming out with a pretty high good reputation from the college game. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Darnold can do with new surroundings. Transitioning to some veteran QBs who have swapped around positions. Let's start. Ryan Fitzpatrick is off to Washington. He's off to the Washington football team, still without a nickname, which sounds weird. But Fitzpatrick, obviously, we talked about Haskins just there. Fitzpatrick will effectively take over as the starter there. Obviously, he found himself at a team with a young QB in Tua last season. Obviously, started the first half of the season and then sort of saw his role diminish a bit. And I dare say he did express his discontent at times. So this makes sense for him, at least. But yeah, Rithik, what do you think? Because again, going back to last year, the division the Washington football team were in with the Cowboys and the Eagles it was horrifying to look at times at how these teams were stacking up against each other in a division sense. But Fitzpatrick, that's an improvement, isn't it? That's Washington can build on that. They made the playoffs last season, and adding him is going to be pretty good in the short term.
I refuse to call him anything other than Fitzmagic. I feel like that should be his name. I think he's got a wonderful beard and he's a wonderful player. So, look, I think he wasn't particularly happy about being replaced as a starter, especially when he didn't do badly at all. And I'm not surprised. But he was very gracious in being the mentor for Tua, and I think he played a brilliant role in coming in when Tua sort of looked a bit shaky, which is what you expect from a from a rookie quarterback to an extent. I don't think you can expect anyone to come in and be 100% like ready to go. So I think this is a good move for him. It's a move where he can become a starter. Washington haven't showed too much interest, if any, really, in picking up another quarterback. They've just signed Curtis Samuel alongside his teammate Terry McLaurin. So I think it gives Fitzmagic a good base to work from. They got Antonio Gibson in at the running back who had a good rookie season last year. So I think for Fitzmagic, it's a 1 year starting job. And then I think the Washington football team, when they get their new name, I think at the end of next season, is one that they can move on from and have a successful season. I think if you can make the playoffs with Dwayne Haskins, Alex Smith, and Taylor Heineke all sort of taking on different roles and playing every game, and Taylor Heineke going in and basically being like this weird revelation, I think they have a chance. The rest of the team has a chance of carrying them again towards a playoff run. And if you remember, they kind of pushed the Buccaneers all the way. So I think they have the other pieces alongside now a good veteran quarterback to make a run at divisional games.
Fitzmagic. You're exactly right. That's what I just need to refer to him as all times. I mean, we talk about Washington making the playoffs. Obviously, their divisional rivals have strengthened in some way. We'll get to the Eagles in just a sec, but the big one are the Cowboys. Kurt has made a huge commitment to Dak Prescott in terms of awarding him a big contract. They've committed to him now. Obviously, he suffered a horrendous injury during last season, still sort of on the mend at the moment. There was a lot of debate on whether the Cowboys should pay him or not. I remember, it was sort of dominating the headlines. Was he worth the investment or not? But clearly, Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, they decided he was their guy. Were you surprised that they ended up stumping up that much money? I think it's $160 million. Were you surprised that they stumped up the money for him, or was it sort of a no-brainer decision?
Definitely not a no-brainer, but I was surprised by how much it was, put it that way. I think it would have looked a bit criminal if they didn't pay him after his injury. I think that would have been looking a bit suspect there. But so I think they had to pay him. They had to give him a contract. But I was surprised by how much it was exactly, given that he's got the most guaranteed money, I think, in NFL quarterbacks at the moment, which is just insane to think. But, the guy works hard and he's clearly a great influence on the team. They crumbled without him last year. So he's very important to the team. And I think they need him there. And whatever he asks for, you give it to him, because he's made your team recently. And, without him, even Zeke didn't look himself.
Yes. And they were... it was pretty clear that once his injury came in, that team sort of lost their trajectory. I guess it took a bit of a nosedive in the short term, and so will be interesting to see what happens. Rithik, I know you want to weigh on Dak and his new contract with the Cowboys, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think Dak got what could be referred to as the Cowboys tax, where the Cowboys are the biggest market in the NFL, and if you're the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, you're gonna get paid a ridiculous amount of money anyway. I don't think he's a top 5 quarterback, which is what he's getting paid. And I think what this move does is I think Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield, these guys who are due for contract extensions either this year or next year, are looking at that Dak Prescott deal, which is just sort of short of Patrick Mahomes money. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, I think, are better than Dak. Baker Mayfield on a similar level, or just below Dak. I think they're going to be looking at this deal of Dak getting $40 million a year. And these guys have a serious case then for getting 40, 45, and then very close to Mahomes, $50 million a year, especially Lamar with his MVP in the bag. So I think this move was the move that they needed to make. I think they made it. They gave him too much money, but they had to. And I think this just throws the entire quarterback market just into a complete mess. And the Ravens front office and the Bills front office probably hated that move, because it means that they now have to pay their guys more than what Dak got paid, just because their guys are in my eyes, objectively better than him.
Yeah, it'll be sort of a landscape shaping move, and we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what team execs do, because sometimes team execs make really irrational decisions. But it does. I mean, we are harping on the NFC East, and there is a bit of a focus on that, but it's just because there were a lot of changes. We now go over to the Philadelphia Eagles, and they have traded Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts. Again, because these trades happened a while ago, I can't remember the exact details, but essentially Wentz has gone to the Colts. It now means presumably Jalen Hurts is the starting QB with the Eagles. I know they signed Joe Flacco. I don't know if you're relying on him as a starting QB, I would worry. But Curtis, let's start with the Wentz trade. Was it just sort of like a decision that had to be made, I guess, because relationships sort of broken down between the franchise and the player? Let's talk about it. Well, we can talk. I mean, feel free to talk about it from whatever side, the Eagles side or the Colts side. But what did you think of the move?
Yeah, I liked it for both teams actually, and I liked it for Carson Wentz himself. I think it was really important for him to get out of there because, as you say, I think just everything fell apart last season, and it was no fault of anyone really, because I think the team was severely hampered by injuries and this sort of, you get a discontented fan base, you get bad results mixing in, and it's just not a very pleasant atmosphere. And I think Carson Wentz was right to get out of there when he could. I don't think it was very much. I think it was like a third round pick this year and a conditional 2 next year, something like that. But yeah, it's a fantastic move for Carson Wentz, and I think he's going to a team which is ready to compete now, and they're getting a starting quarterback who is ready to compete now in Carson Wentz. So I think it's a really nice move for the Colts. And as I say, for the Eagles, I'm a bit shaky on them at the moment. Just Jalen Hurts looked great in his first 2 starts. After that, it went a bit shaky, and you can't expect too much from a second round pick at this point in their career. And I think there was even rumor that the Eagles were looking to trade up to the 3rd overall pick, but then they got rejected. That's why they traded back, something like that anyway. So the idea was that they were going to take a quarterback, but because they don't think they can get their guy anymore, I think it was Zach Wilson they wanted to get, then they're just saying, oh, well, we'll just go again next year, probably.
Oh, there we go. It's the Eagles are, I mean, right now in terms of franchises, sort of picking out what these franchises, their direction is, it's hard to pinpoint it, but yeah, the Wentz thing I think was a great move. Rithik, Phillip Rivers obviously retired at the end of last season. Now the Colts have, it's one of the best replacements you can get, really, like in terms of a player who's, he's been in the game for a while. He obviously very, very good at, he can play the rushing game and the passing game. And obviously the Colts with a strong rushing attack last year with Jonathan Taylor and Naheem Hines. It's and obviously still got Ty Hilton in the receiver core. It definitely strengthens them for sure.
Yeah, I think they've also got Marlon Mack coming back, which I think will be huge for the run game. They got Frank Reich in there, who worked with Carson Wentz in Philadelphia, who was part of his MVP caliber season. So I think Carson Wentz is a guy who, again, is basically proof that the environment you're in is huge. And I think the environment he's moving to in Indianapolis is fantastic. Again, you have to shout out Pat McAfee if you watch the interview with Carson Wentz. I think you see Carson Wentz is happy now. He knows where he wants to be. He knows what he wants to do. And I didn't really like the move for the Eagles in terms of sticking with Jalen Hurts, because Jalen Hurts, like Curtis said, he was okay, but he wasn't that good. I'm looking at his stats right now. In 52% completion, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in, I think he played 5 or 6 games. It's not great. Now, it could be because of everyone around him and not having weapons, but also he just wasn't fantastic either. So I think they're in a weird spot. I don't think they make a playoff run this year. I think they also finish third in the NFC East, especially with the Cowboys being back at full strength. I think Philadelphia are going to be struggling a little bit for the next couple years.
Yeah, and we can move across to another NFC East team, one that added enough offense. Have been adding to their offensive weapons, and a significant one, I think. The Giants paid, I think, $72 million for Kenny Golladay, which I think that's one of the most significant moves in the receiver for receivers so far in this free agency period. I mean, because they surprised people last season with how good their defense was, at least, and obviously, Daniel Jones gets another year to sort of embed himself with NFL, offense, and I mean, Golladay that's a great move, isn't it? And you could argue that the Giants have been missing a receiver of this ilk since Odell Beckham Jr. So it's a big win for them.
It is a big win. I have concerns about how much they paid him, firstly, but also I have concerns about Kenny Golladay as a whole, because don't get me wrong, he's a fantastic receiver, and I think he always beats my Cardinals every time we play him. He does well against us. It's very bad to watch for me, but he's a great player, and I really enjoy watching him play. But the issue is that he doesn't play a whole lot, and I don't know how many 16-game seasons he's completed since being a rookie, but it hasn't felt like a whole lot anyway, and he's gone missing in some games as well. So I have issues about whether he's a true primary receiver or not, because we saw last year that he was an important part to Detroit's offense, but he wasn't there a whole lot, and that's why Detroit wasn't so good. And so, I have questions about whether he can really bring that X factor that he promises to New York. I understand he was the best receiver in free agency, and so New York have done all they can, really. But I'm just wondering if it's, as good as people are saying at the moment.
Well, you mentioned your Cardinals, and I think we bring up, I think the only move that Adam Schefter probably hasn't announced on Twitter, who, for those who don't know, is the NFL insider for ESPN, who seems to have his finger on the pulse on a lot of these moves. I mean, the Cardinals made they won the JJ Watt sweepstakes. I don't think it's worth talking about the Texans. I don't really know what they're going on. Obviously, on a serious note, the allegations against Deshaun Watson, obviously, they obviously, I don't want to speak about them too much, but obviously they are quite serious, and we will let the process, I guess, the investigation play out and see how we go on that one before making any judgment. But yeah, the Texans are in a fair bit of pain and turmoil at the moment. But so let's not talk about them. We'll talk about the Cardinals and what JJ Watt brings. I know you both want to weigh in this. I'll start with Rithik. I mean, it's a big move, isn't it? It's a huge move.
It's a huge move, but also it was a very surprising move to me, because I think JJ Watt's getting to that. It's what they call the ring chasing point of his career, where he's an older guy. He's not old. Who is just a ridiculously good player, 100+ career sacks, 3-time defensive player of the year. He's not a guy you sort of like, even at his age now, that you ever want to miss out on. But I think he had really all of the leverage in the situation to go to any team he wanted to. And it looked as though he was going to choose sort of winning potential over money. But I think he kind of sort of ended up going a bit more towards the money side. No offense to Curtis, but the Cardinals, I don't think they're a winning team right now. They'll win, and I think they'll win more games than they lose, definitely. But I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. I don't think they're a particularly sort of strong playoff team. I think they can be, which is why he signed a 2-year deal instead of a 1-year deal. But I think it was a very surprising move compared to where he could have gone, because it was really his choice. And I think I was a bit more of a pessimistic view of the move, but I'm sure Curtis, as a fan, you probably have a bit more positive things to say about the move.
Yeah, Curtis, I just want to ask you, I mean, yeah, feel free to talk about, I'd love to know what your sort of emotions were like throughout, learning that JJ Watt may be interested in Arizona, and then sort of what happened from there, but also in general about how the team's moves in general, because obviously for me, one that stuck out was losing Patrick Peterson to the Vikings, because he frequently took the best receiver on throughout the season. And he had a decent success rate. I don't think he won every battle, but he certainly made it really tough. So yeah, just a blank canvas on the Cardinals. Go ahead to rant or praise as much as you want.
Yeah, I've got to agree with Rithik, to be honest. I don't think we're a winning team at the moment. We're looking at sort of a wild card spot, I think. We're not looking at a deep playoff run or anything like that, but definitely sort of, a 6th or 7th seed team, I think. But I think what JJ Watt brings is more than just his play. Of course, he's a fantastic player. And I think he was something like the most double-teamed player in all of football in terms of pass rush last year, which is insane to think at, 31. But yeah, I think he brings this sort of leadership, this aura that other players just don't seem to have. And I think that's what's important. And it's a culture thing, really. And that's why they brought in players such as AJ Green as well, another guy who, people have likened to even Larry Fitzgerald, someone who's got longevity in the league, someone who will be looking to sort of be that leader figure who can rally on the troops of this really young team. And I think you mentioned Patrick Peterson, Josh, and it's a really bad loss for us, I think, because he's obviously a staple of the franchise, and one of the biggest players I can remember since becoming a fan, to be honest. And it was really sad to see him leave, but we brought in Malcolm Butler, and as I'm sure everyone knows, Malcolm Butler made that infamous interception for the Patriots in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks. So he'll be back to haunt you guys for two times a year now. But for me, he's a direct upgrade on Patrick Peterson. So I don't think it's going to be a huge loss for now, but it's sort of like a changing of the tides kind of thing, that we've let go of Peterson and we've brought in Malcolm Butler. It's sort of it's a sign of a different era, and I think that leaves up in the air what Larry Fitzgerald wants to do with his career now as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's that division that the Cardinals are in, the Seahawks, the Niners. I mean, that was a really competitive one last season, and not like the AFC East or the NFC East when things were like the teams were just losing games and making it competitive. They were all very well coached teams and really good teams to watch. So again, it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Yeah, I mean, there's two teams left that's sort of on my list of that have made big moves. We'll get the first one out of the way because I think the second one, I think both of you want to weigh in. I did want to weigh in on the Bucks because they didn't. It's not like they added anyone new, but they managed to keep everyone, which is worrying. They managed to keep, and I'm just going for a mental list. They managed to keep. Chris Godwin, I think they managed to keep. They managed to keep Shaquille Barrett on a big deal, but again, a very good defensive player. Leonard Fournette has decided to stay. Gronk is staying. A lot of key players that made big contributions to their Super Bowl win and the road to the Super Bowl as well. Rithik, it's the Bucks are going to be up there again, I bet, coming next season.
I don't know where they're finding this money. Like, they had no money, but they found a hell of a lot of it somewhere. And I think a lot of it, again, it was Tom Brady doing what Tom Brady does. He's not too fussed about the money. His wife's like the highest paid supermodel in the world. He's got enough money. He's played for 20 years. So he was like, you know what? I'll take a pay cut. You could do whatever you want to my deal. I'll sign it just to bring everyone back. I think the guy the only guy left to bring back is Antonio Brown. But I think there may be a bit of a thing on the money with Antonio Brown because of he's got a few. He's not the most stable of characters, but Tom Brady likes him. He seemed to like being there. He was on a very small deal last year. I think he will want more money. I don't think he ends up somewhere else. But I think that's just the one thing that they got to sort. And even if they don't get him, it's not like they're losing their primary weapons. They still have a load of weapons, and I wouldn't be surprised if they make it back into the Super Bowl. I just think that had probably the quietest, but also the best free agency out of anyone. I think if you're a winning team, being able to keep everyone is probably the best thing you can do. They had no reason to get anyone new, and they didn't, and they kept everyone who people said were going to go. I think overall they just played it really well.
Yeah. They don't need Antonio Brown, do they? That was a vanity sort of pick. Certainly if he goes, I mean, they still have obviously players I didn't mention who have obviously already contracted them. They still have Mike Evans. They still have a decent team there. I think Sammy Miller that's another one, isn't it? Scotty Miller. That's it. So they still have a decent team. And yeah, also not a huge move to talk about, but the Chiefs also signed up. Is it Joe Tunney, offensive lineman, on a big contract as well? So they've obviously reinforced. So those two teams are probably going to be up there. I don't think there's much more to add on that. So I mean, we move on. I guess the big headline, and I guess inevitably we've sort of saved it for last. Not deliberately, but sort of that's just how it's ended up. Bill Belichick is gone spending. He's going spending. Robert Kraft has given him a big wallet, and he's just gone, I want you, and you. The Patriots made a huge splash throughout this free agency. Let me try and get a list of names. But they signed, obviously, Jonnu Smith, who was a pretty decent tight end at the Titans. They've obviously re-signed Cam White, Nelson Aguilar from the Raiders, a receiver, Kendrick Bourne, another receiver, Hunter Henry from the Chargers. They acquired Trent Brown, who I think it was, at least he has played at the Pro Bowl level, so an elite level offensive tackle. I think they've signed the most amount of people, really. Curtis, I mean, obviously, first year without Tom Brady, they don't make the playoffs. Obviously, quite disappointing. They obviously responded. Did you expect that this would be that there'd be a huge extent to their response, that they would then splash the cash on literally every position that's out there?
Do you know what this feels like? It feels like Tom Brady's gathering the Infinity Stones, and Bill Belichick's gone, I need the Avengers and I need the Guardians, and he's just brought the whole gang together, and he's starting a war, But seriously, on a serious note, I think I'm surprised that Bill Belichick has done this, because he doesn't strike me as the kind of person who likes to spend a lot in free agency. But he's done it nevertheless, and I think I applaud the moves, to be honest. I think especially those two tight ends, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith that you mentioned, are both fantastic scheme fits for this Patriots offense that he likes to run with a two tight end formation. And I think that's what they were missing for a lot of last year. I think Cam Newton with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry is going to be a lot better than he was last year, basically, because this is what the Patriots like to have. And, when David Asiasi, or whatever his name is your starting tight end, I think that's that really.
Yeah, and I mean, really, there's a lot of names that they've signed, a lot of new rivals, and it's going to be a big preseason, I guess, for them to embed these guys into a system and get them up to speed. Does this? I mean, I have no idea what your predictions were for the Patriots before free agency in terms of next season, but does this? What does this do for their prospects going forward?
Well, I actually kind of just want to shout myself out first, because I remember I messaged someone at the beginning of the season who's a Patriots fan, and I said that they were like, oh yeah, he's gonna be great, and they're gonna be fine, and they're gonna get to the playoffs. And I messaged him, I wish I could go back and find it for proof, but I messaged him saying the Patriots are gonna go 7-9, and they did. So that was the first thing. And then I think there are some names that weren't thrown out. I think Matt Judon, a fantastic pickup. He's 29 years old, a 4-year deal, maybe a bit long, but I think Bill was just like, he's good, we'll bring him in, and they've got an out after 2 years. I think keeping a hold of David Andrews was huge. starting center is something that you really want someone who's sort of stable in that role. They brought back Kyle Van Noy, again, a big Bill Belichick guy. And like Curtis said, Johnny Smith, Hunter Henry, they like to run 2 tight ends. They did it back in the early 2010s with Rob Gronkowski, and we're not going to name the other person, but I think people know who that was. Not a great guy, but a fantastic player. So, look, I don't think they're going to be a Super Bowl team. I don't think they're going to be an NFC. No, they're going to be a championship game team. I think they're going to be a wild card team, but I think it's a good start. Like I said, I think if a quarterback falls, they should take one. They might want to trade up for the 4th one and give Cam a bit of competition, because I think Cam, he's a bit hit and miss, but he does have weapons now. That at wide receiver, they're not elite weapons like Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne. They're not elite weapons, but Tom Brady never needed elite weapons. The Bill Belichick system doesn't need elite weapons. So I think it's intriguing. I think they either do really well or they just completely fall apart. I don't think there's a middle ground for them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. I mean, I'm just literally just sitting through it. And yeah, you mentioned the Cam Newton re-sign. That was, for me, that was eyebrow raising to an extent, because obviously he struggled last season at times. Was it Jarrett Stidham? He had some goes at it last season. So that was their season in a nutshell, really. So we'll be interesting to see what happens and how. Again, it's a lot of signings. We'll see how they do. Can't wait to see how they go against obviously the Dolphins, who will be better with a more experienced Tua, and obviously the Bills as well. So yeah, I think we've pretty much run through all the major headlines. I mean, granted, there's still going to be a ton of headlines to come with the draft, with whatever the moves are made. Obviously, their players. We mentioned this off camera, but Aaron Rodgers is obviously still playing that sort of vague. We don't know. We don't know what's going on. Whether he wants to stay at Green Bay, whether he's playing a bit of a PR game. Russell Wilson as well. It's hard. I mean, as in terms of high-profile players, he's also sort of future remains murky. I dare say, and as a Seahawks fan, I dare say he's probably going to stay now because of just what's happened around the league, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, I mean, there's still obviously a lot of twists and turns, and so we shall see. It's going to be interesting. But that will do it for us. You can obviously follow, and obviously again for the podcast listeners, you won't see this, but on the video listeners, you can watch us. You can see everyone's sort of social media. Follow everyone. Follow Raw Sport on Instagram and Twitter as well. That will do it for us. Thank you so much to Rithik and Curtis for coming on to talk about this, the draft and free agency. Draft, as I said, coming up at the end of April, and free agency will just keep going. It will just keep going. So continue to expect the unexpected, like the Sam Darnold trade, because that was unexpected, for instance. And we will be back, I guess, in term 3, unless we do anything else standalone. We'll be back in term 3. So thank you so much for listening and for watching, and we will see you then.